Yeah, I mean, we could have a collab. I'm talking with the Sams. I mean, when am I not? But I'm trying to pretend that I'm directly talking to the Sams. But I think the way that this correspondence works is that there's there's like there was this one movie, not a movie. It was like a little, kind of like this. It was like a little podcast thing, and this dude was talking about this other dude that he found online that he was making some weird game, and it was weird because it would have like stairs. You remember like with Super Mario 64 where you would go up those stairways and it would just continue forever and ever and ever. You could just run up these stairs for forever and ever and ever and never get to the top. And he would make stuff like that in these little games. And it wasn't it like when it started off, he was just making these little games just because he wanted to make them. And some dude found and started to play them. And he kept talking to the game creator. He's like, who are you and why did you make it like this? And he was like really curious about this guy. But the game creator was like really, really, really reserved, like really shy, painfully shy, and wouldn't talk to him directly very much. Like he would just barely correspond with him. And uh, it got to the point where the dude was trying to get the game creator to talk to him, basically begging him to talk to him about like, you know, why is it that you make these games like this? Because they would have like some really cryptic, subtle, like metaphor behind it. Like it wasn't just a stair that you could go up forever. It was like in front of a building that had a book in it that like you would never be able to open the door. The only way that you'd ever know that it was in there is if you went into the coding itself. Like if you went into the files themselves and looked in the files, then you'd know that there was this book that was in that room, but you can't actually get in it. And it's like stuff like that. It's like, why would you do that? Because it's on purpose, obviously. It's not like the dude sucked at making games and just didn't know how to let someone walk through the front door or build an archway or something. He deliberately went out of his way to do stuff like that. And it was really compelling and mysterious. And you could tell that the game creator was trying to get people to interact with him through the game, but not live. Like, he would make this game and it would say stuff. It's almost like this. It's like I'm giving a monologue right now. There's no one else there, but it kind of feels like it's a conversation, but it isn't, because whoever you are, I've never met you and we've never met, but I'm talking to you like you're about to say something. It's like a conversation, except it isn't. And so I think that that's kind of how the Sams talk to us, because it's like they will build these systems, these entire systems where there are these little choices. Like they'll say some kind of, the latest thing that they've been doing is something I just picked up on is they can't indoctrinate people. So they can't tell you anything you don't already know. If you learn something, great, that's fantastic. That's half the point that they're here. But they can't tell you. You have to get it yourself. And the reason is pretty obvious. It's if they told you what the answer is, which answer should they give you? And you'd be like, well, the right one. Well, there isn't always just one right answer. Sometimes there's a multiplicity of different choices just depending on what you want. And pretty much all choices are actually like that. The more that you start to look into life and like all the diverse ways that you could look at every single moment, then you start to realize like there's this whole fucking universe that opens up. And it really is interactive. instead of them saying words at you that are just flat and dead, they give you an interactive simulated experience or world that you can interact with. But it's like a choose your own adventure story, because you can't ever go back. You only ever get to go forward. And you have to choose just in that moment, right then and there. And you have to make sure that well, you can't make sure because there's not enough time. And this is the thing that used to fucking annoy the fuck out of me when I first started. I just remembered the most fucking annoying thing was this split second fucking shit where it was like, depending on what the thing is, there's a split second window of time, and that's it. It only lasts for a split second. And I used to think that it was them fucking with me, because it was like, why would you make things like that? Why would anyone make it so that you only have a split second to access this particular variant timeline, that you can access these particular consequences? This person will only give you the box if you say X at this specific time, and you don't get any advance notice. It's just as soon as the option becomes available, that's when you find out that it even existed. So that, yeah, you could theoretically gut instinctually react to it, but if you didn't, then it's gone. And you can't like write a letter to the editor and ask them for a second chance. You just blew it, and then there's nothing. And then that's it forever. And there's no way that you'll ever be able to access it again. And it's like, how can you, first of all, tantalize me with these little trinkets? Because what it was chicks. They would say, well, if you say this word at this moment, they'll open for you, and you can access them. Like, find out who this person is, get to know this person, develop some kind of intimacy with them. Yes, sexual, of course, but also everything else too. But I would always be thinking about it before the option presented itself, and then it would be like, okay, so now it can't happen, because I was already too far in my own head to react like a normal person would, that's in the moment, that's just hanging out, that's just present, like that's paying attention to the real surroundings that are around them, not floating off in the clouds somewhere in their fucking head thinking they're talking to aliens. So it would annoy the shit out of me, because it would be the split second, and I learned it over time because I tested it, and it worked. As long as I followed what they were saying, it would go fine. But the moment that I would deviate, it would blow up every time. And it only gave me these split seconds windows of time. And I noticed that if I missed it, that it would just evaporate. And I'm assuming now it's because back then I was homeless and I was scruffy, and they knew it. And so they're not going to give me much of a chance, because there's so much against me that it's an uphill battle. And that's why the windows were so small. Now, it's not like that, because the people that I've got in my life now are a lot more forgiving. There's a lot more of these 4D connections to my 5D choice tree. I have a whole bunch of these branches, so I can access this person from all kinds of different vantage points, because they are forgiving enough that they stay in my life more often than not, where it's not just this one-off thing like it is with people that I'll meet on the street. And all of this is to say that the SAMs obviously have what I call the light crystal, which is a group of possibilities or possible worlds, causal worlds, where everything inside of it is all causally connected, but there's no connection causally from the inside out. So the causality only goes inward. It only goes in, it never comes out. And all that means is that while the part of that universe, let's say a planet, could be affected by something that happens outside the universe, something outside the universe cannot be affected by what happens on that planet. In order for something to be momentous enough that it affects something outside of this universe, it would have to happen at the edge of the universe. It would have to happen at the peripheral edge or limit of this universe. Just like if I was a cell in my body, the only way that I would be able to interact with the world outside is if I became or moved up to a skin cell. And only the skin cells have access to the air that's outside the body. If I want to leave the body, I have to go to a skin cell. If I want to interact with anything in the world directly, I have to go to a skin cell. I can learn some things about the outside from the inside. If I was in the intestinal tract or the lungs or the nasal cavity or something like that, there's various sensory data centers, whatever you want to call it, for that. And I can learn from those senses, but I only learn indirectly, and I don't have any direct access, and I certainly can't physically leave just directly through that. All that does is tell me what might be awaiting me on the other side, but there would be no way for me to give you an exact ppm reading of the air outside based off of any data that I would have on the inside of my body. So in that same way, if the body were a universe, then you can make that analogy fit and it will make sense as to the causal distinction between the two. Because, for example, regardless of where I am in the body, if this body gets ejected into a volcano or in the deep space where there's no air, it doesn't matter where I'm at in the body, whether I'm in the eyeball, a tooth, my butthole. If my body gets put into some other scenario, in some other environment, it's going to get affected. But it won't necessarily affect the environment if I change as a little cell on the inside of my body. And so that's what I mean when I say that the causality of the universe is what makes it a thing. It's what makes it its own thing. Like my body is defined by the fact that things that happen on the inside don't necessarily affect the outside, but what happens on the outside does necessarily affect what happens on the inside. And so the inside of what? And so then you've got your skin. And that's what defines the limit of your body. So anything that's inside your skin is a part of your body. Anything that's beyond your skin or on top of it is outside your body. And so then your skin is what defines your body, or at least it's what defines the limit of your body, the outermost limit of your body. And that's where things make contact with your body. They don't somehow teleport inside you and then grow out. They approach you from the outside in. And so I think that the SAMs can travel faster than light, and therefore they can travel outside the body. They can travel outside of this universe. They can go into the multiverse landscape, which is an entire ocean of all these different little universes, or sea, whatever. They put sea in my head, and I deliberately was like, no, I'm going to say ocean instead of sea. But there's an entire sea of all these different universes. And it isn't like what we've envisioned conventionally on this planet as humans so far. It isn't like anything that we've usually traditionally shown. The multiverse landscape, from what I would speculate it to be is that there's all these universes that exist totally independently of each other, in the same way that my body is totally independent from your body. So it doesn't matter. You could say, oh, well, then, they're all variants of each other. But they're not, though, because you're not a variant of me. I'm not a variant of you. We're totally different people. So in that same way, these universes that all exist in the multiversal landscape are not simply copies of this universe in different variant times or spaces or laws or whatever. These are totally different universes. Now, all of the universes share the exact same basic physical laws, but some of them are going to be more massive than others. In my opinion, slightly, meaning that they're not exactly uniform, but they're basically all the same size. And the reason that I'm saying that is not scientific and it's not logical. It's purely mystical because of a vision that I got when I asked what I thought to be God, which I believe I was talking to the Sams, but I don't know. It could have been from God, and then the Sams just delivered the message to me. I don't know. But I got a vision when I asked God, what do you see? And I got this vision, and this vision was of the multiverse landscape as, like I said, a whole bunch of these little universes. And they looked like little oil droplets or little oil bubbles. And they were fluid. There was a softness to them. They weren't a hard, static, shiny sphere. They were like a fluid, almost goopy. I would say goop would be the consistency of what these universes were like, substantially, structurally, physically. And they were these little droplets of goopiness, and they would be right next to each other, adjacent to each other. There's no gaps. There's no isolated universes all spread out. They were all right next to each other. And they were kind of fluidly in motion all the time. They weren't exactly statically at rest. They were kind of fluidly, not jarringly, not jerkingly, but just fluidly sort of floating, I guess is the word for it. And they were, if they weren't orbiting, they were nestled at the very least. I think they were nestled, not orbiting, because they didn't seem, from the vision, because it's like a GIF. I was given like this little, 2-second, 1-second GIF. It wasn't exactly a photograph. It wasn't exactly a static image. It was like this fluid sort of, like I said, like a GIF, just a short little tiny clip, maybe a couple seconds long, but it wasn't a photograph. They're very different, because in a photograph you can't really tell the context very well, but if you've got at least a couple seconds in there, you can see if something's moving around or if it's staying still and stuff like that. So anyway, I got this vision when I asked that, and I saw a whole bunch of these universes nestled around a white hole at the very center of the multiverse landscape, and it was really bright right at the center, and then it was like fairly bright, but not blindingly so, just beyond it. And then it slowly got dimmer and dimmer as it moved out from the center. And it wasn't like it was in motion. I'm just saying the light was radiating from the center. Just for the most part of the volume, it was a pleasant glow, I guess you'd say. But at the very, very center, it was obviously much more intense and much more bright, very bright at the center. So bright that I could see the light from the white hole shining through the universes that were nestled around it, such that the universes that were nestled around it were rendered at least partially translucent, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see the light through their opaque bodies. So there was at least some translucence of these universes, that at least some of the light propagated, throughout. Now, I don't know if that means that that's all true. I don't know. This is just something I saw. So could it be true? Maybe, but is it? I don't fucking know. It's just something I saw back then. So I can't act on that. It's like I was telling Talia today. It's like I have the ability to cross the line into psychosis. And sometimes when I do that, I get good ideas. And sometimes when I do it, I get bad ideas. And sometimes when I do it, I just waste my fucking time. But if I do that and then I come back to sanity afterwards and then analyze that, I can actually take away things that make sense and actually build something that makes sense and that I can actually use in the real world. But if I couldn't do either of those, I'd be fucked, because if all I could do is analyze, but I could never reach beyond, then I would not be able to create or invent or discover or be in awe of things around me. I would just take everything for granted, and I would just analyze it for, its simple parts, and then be like, and that's all it is. And on the opposite end, if all I could ever do was be a psychotic freak and just, bumble about, then I would never be able to implement any of these ideas, and it wouldn't matter if they were genius, because I wouldn't be able to get them across to anyone else to be able to understand it, because it's too obscure, it's too specific, it's too, or at least it's just too weird. It's just too stuff that no one else says, it's just weird. So I can't act on those, but I also don't try to determine whether or not they're true. I just say, irregardless of that, what am I going to do? And I don't dismiss it. I just don't affirm or deny it. I don't affirm or deny any unfalsifiable claim. If there's a claim, or at least I try not to. I'm not a saint. I fucked up today because somebody was said to have taken something from the vending machine without paying, but I don't know if they actually did or not. And me and Rusty were talking about it. It's like, that doesn't make any sense, because the dude has so much money. Why would he even bother doing that? And it's like, well, maybe he did, because it was just, he just didn't feel like it. He just didn't feel like paying for it, and he just fucking walked out. Oh, fuck it. Short-term gain. And it just didn't make sense. So it's like, we don't know if he actually took it or not. All we know is the security guard said that that's what he did. But we don't know why he said that. We don't know if he was actually doing that or not, because we didn't see it. We're just going off what the security guard said. So, me personally, I really try hard not to judge unless I have to. If someone else puts themselves in a position where they are guilty of something, and it's just objectively a fact, and I become aware of that fact, then I don't have a choice but to judge them, because they did something wrong, But until that happens, if there's any shadow of any doubt in my head, I really try to reserve judgment, because I don't know, and I could be wrong, and I have been wrong a lot, and it's embarrassing, and it makes me feel humiliated afterwards, because I accused an innocent person of something that they didn't do. I was stupid enough to believe that they did, and I was wrong. And I hate being technically inaccurate, and I really can't stand getting things wrong or judging someone for something that they didn't do, because no one likes that. No one likes being accused of something that they didn't do. So anyway, the SAMs, I think, the way that they talk to us is through these systems where we can choose to look at things in a particular way. And if we choose to look at them in one way, we'll see one answer for that. And if we look at it another way, we'll see something else. But there's only time and space enough for each of us to only experience so much of that. And the reason that they give us more than that is so that we have room enough to move around, that we're not stuck in a cage where every single decision that we could ever make has already been planned for us, because that would be superfluous, ridiculous. If they're going to do that, they may as well just build robots that did all that. And if they were going to do that, then they may as well just build whatever it is that the robots were going to build faster than that. And if they were going to do that, then they wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be here. So I think that given the advanced technology, the power that the aliens have, and the fact that they don't abuse that, means that the aliens are good people. And not only that, but in my own personal subjective life, I feel like I have seen at least their intent. I believe that I've seen their intent, which is to raise us like a parent would raise a child. And it's just as much equal parts holding us accountable as their children, but also giving us enough freedom to make our own decisions, and the benefit of the doubt when it's not possible to know the guilt of the child. So the reason that they don't ever leave is, I believe, that we haven't grown up to an adult level, meaning that we can still be swayed or made to do things, or tricked or seduced, things like that, and to our own detriment. And as long as that's the case, then we can't be considered an adult. An adult is someone who is independent enough that if you rock the boat, it doesn't capsize. If you push this person in a particular trajectory, that they will go there. And if they resist that and they don't go there, then they're an adult. If they just go wherever you're putting them, then they're a kid. And until each individual is capable of getting to a point where they can just go their own way, regardless of what their environment is telling them to do, until that day, then the SAMs, are obligated to raise us to that point. So that's what they're here to do. And that's why they can't leave. Because if they do leave, it's abandonment. Because then what's the line? Well, they don't always have to be here. Okay, so then when don't they have to be here? And who makes that decision? And how many times do we get to experiment with random innocent people before there's so many dead bodies and so many completely ruined civilizations that we finally realize that no one knows how to draw that line? And so we just draw an absolute line. So that's partially for me, but also partially for anyone else that thinks that the SAMs might be interested in them sexually. No, they are not. And, don't go that route. Because these are people, yes, but they are way too advanced to approach in that way. It's not really even possible to do it, because it's just way too far beyond our comprehension, our ability to sustainably do that. we dabble in it? Yeah, that's how I know about it. But can we sustain it? No. No, there's no way to sustain that. Not as a human. Now, given a few tweaks, there would have to be quite a lot, but with a few advancements, then we could approach more of them that way. And over time, the social boundaries between humans and aliens will get smaller and smaller, and eventually we'll be able to at least sort of interact with them socially as we advance. But the reason I say sort of is because we're so new that the only aliens that will most likely interact with us at all, given that we're so immature, are people that have eclectic interests and lesser aliens that we raise. So the odds of us being socialites with the aliens is very, very, very slim. In other words, most likely the only communication that an alien would bother having is an emergency. If it isn't an emergency, there's really not going to be much to talk about because the differences between them are so vast that there's almost nothing in common. And if there's not really anything in common, then there's really nothing to talk about. So there's a huge, vast chasm in between us and them in that way, in the same way that there is between adults and children. They don't spend much time together because it's kind of a burden on the adult, and the child doesn't really play as well with an adult as they do with another child. And that's why children typically prefer to hang out with other children, and adults typically tend to hang out with other adults. And like I said, it's only rarely that you're going to find situations where that's not the case, because it sometimes isn't. And there will be those cases. And those cases, like already here, God damn it. So anyway, the instances in which that happens are going to increase, and they're going to take center stage. That's what's going to make the news. That's what people are going to think of when they think of aliens, is the ones that do want to interact with children. So, and like I said, some of them do that because they're parental. Some of them do that for, various reasons, but all of them have limits. All of them have boundaries, just like we do. So the difference between the biggest differences that are between aliens and humans, in other words, are in the sense of it being like, how do I put it? There's a difference between us in our subjective views, like, different types of art, things like that. But there's almost no difference in terms of relativity, unless we're talking about advancements, like the scale of it. How big of an idea is it? How massive is the idea? How broad is it, etc. But of course, there's going to be a massive difference between a human and an alien as far as their advancement, because the aliens are obviously going to be way more logically advanced than we are. So they're going to have way vaster theories than we have. But the logic is logical, just like the logic is logical here. There's no difference there. So in other words, anything that any alien ever wrote that's philosophical, that's logical, that's mathematical or reducible to some logical operation is knowable and discernible by a human, given enough time and given enough ability to understand difficult concepts. And by difficult, I mean the rarity with which someone succeeds at understanding it, at being able to predict it, at being able to predict the outcome of a situation or an interaction with it. So we can learn about them, but the things that we will learn about them are pretty much restricted to stuff like that, where it's like theoretical models and stuff like that they're using. That's how, for example, I've seen a lot of modal logic that they use. Once I became aware of modality, that's when it opened up just barely enough that I could distinguish some of the stuff that the aliens are trying to tell me. Before that, I really wasn't capable of understanding almost anything that they said. And then, as humanity evolves, we'll become more competent, and then we can engage them in more conversations. But the problem, again, is there really isn't much of a point in the aliens talking to us unless there's an emergency. And obviously the emergency is probably going to be on our part with us needing them to intervene. Other than that, there's really not much of a social reason for us to interact, for the most part. So the thing that I would say that would help, that would most likely benefit any random human that would be listening to this, is that yes, you should talk to the SAMs, because we are very crippled and we need help. But don't try to develop a social relationship with them beyond a parental figure. Don't do anything sexual with them. It will get really weird and it will get really difficult to handle. It might lead to a lot of problems for them. I know that sounds kind of odd, but for those of you who would engage them this way, your mind is pliable enough and malleable enough that you can understand what I'm about to say. Is the danger is for the aliens, not for us. And that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know about what that sexual encounter would be like. It's the same as the way that an adult would want to engage a child. They're not going to really be less vulnerable than the child is, because if they get found out, then they're going to go to jail and get killed and shanked at prison, or the dad's going to come out and shoot their face with a shotgun, or whatever. They'll get caught in some way. So the danger is, how do I even put that? It's so difficult to describe it, because it's not really like anything here. I keep trying to find an analogy, but it doesn't really fit. And the reason is because, like I said, I don't know. I've never understood exactly why it ever happened between me and the SAMs. I don't know if it happened to all of them, to one of them, to some of them. I don't know if it happened at all. I don't know if it was a joke. I don't know if it was just me being crazy. I have no idea really what happened, but I do know that there was a sexual component with it, and it did get really weird. And so, like I said, I wouldn't recommend putting that in there, because by the time you do, it gets to the point where you can't tell what the hell's going on, and you just start getting into some really fucked up territory. So I do think, though, that it's important to approach them as people, because so many humans try to just either ignore them or pretend that they're a machine and they have no soul, or pretend that they're demons, or pretend that they worship the devil, or pretend that they're evil, or whatever. And it's not the case that's the way that they are. It's just that they're bound to show whatever it is that the person is already believing. So if a person gets presented with an alien that obviously has more power than they do, that usually will scare them if they're a species that tends to take advantage of each other with that kind of method. It will only scare somebody that would do that themselves, or has seen it happen, or is somehow exposed to that idea and would think that someone would do that. And it's really limited to species that do it themselves, because any species that knows better knows another species that's more advanced than they must know better. But humanity is not quite at that level. It's almost there. It was there mostly for a while, but then we started having world wars, and things really started to go downhill from there. So there's a lot that we need to work on as humans to get to a point where it's not a constant emergency. But at the moment, it is a constant emergency, because they can't directly intervene, but it's not that they need to, it's that we're so fucked up that they almost can't make this place any worse, no matter what they did. But unfortunately, they can't just take over, because if they did that, then we wouldn't be humans. We would be robots or some weird derivative of whatever it is they would make. Arguably, we could be better off that way. But is the effect of us being physically and mentally better off really the point, ethically? Because if you start playing consequentialist, then you always run into the same problem of which consequence is actually better or worse than another. If you say that a human would be better off if they lived for 500 to 1,000 years, why is it that almost every human you ask says that they wouldn't want to be immortal because they'd have to see their friends and family die, which is quite literally the most horrendous, atrocious, stupefying, horrifying, retarded answer that I've ever heard of to any question, because you already have to see your friends and family die. It's just one of the things that I've noticed about humanity. It's one of my pet peeves that I personally, as Michael Trevathan, cannot fucking stand about my own species, is that for some stupid reason, almost every single one of us says that they don't want to be immortal because they would have to watch their friends and family die. Absolutely no part of that makes any sense at all. First of all, you already have to watch all your friends and family die unless you're the first one. Secondly, you wouldn't have to watch your friends and family die if you're immortal, because if you became immortal, you'd have enough time to figure out how to make them immortal. And thirdly, the reason that it pisses me off so goddamn bad is because they're going to die anyway. Why would you want to join them? Why would you want to die? I just don't understand that. But so many people do. They all say that. I want to die. I want to die. Like there's something else What do you mean you want to die? Do you want to die right now? I could kill you right. Oh, no. I don't want to die right now. Well, then what makes you think you would want to die in 10 years? Did you want to die 10 years ago? No, I've never wanted to die. Okay, well, then why would you think that you want to die at some point in the future if you've never wanted to die and you don't want to die now? Oh, I just don't want to be crapping in my pants. Why would you think you would have to crap in your pants? Why would that even be a thing? By the time that you would have to crap in your pants, the medical advancements would be so much better than they are now that you wouldn't have to crap in your pants. The medical technology would advance so quickly that it would be cured before you ever got it. Or if you did get it, it would be eventually cured because you'd live long enough for it to be cured. Dumbass. I mean, I don't understand how people ever arrive at that stupid of a fucking conclusion that they don't want to be immortal. I just don't understand that. And I think that if it isn't the Sams doing that, it's Charles. Because how could you possibly get someone to say that they don't want to be immortal? Why is that a problem? What is the issue? Why would you want to die? Why would you think God would want you to die? That's another one that I hear sometimes is, well, I want to go when God takes me. Well, how do you know when God's going to take you? How do you know that God doesn't want you to live forever? How do you know that? How do you know that God doesn't want you to just keep living? You crazy fuck. And then the other thing is, if you get immortal, right, you're not invulnerable. That's not the same thing as invulnerability. A lot of people think that that's what that is. It's not. It doesn't mean that you are invulnerable. It means that you don't die from senescence. So immortality just means that you don't age. You don't ever get older. You can always stay eternally youthful. As long as you don't get killed, as long as you don't get run over or stabbed or shot or blown up or fall off a cliff or something, then you're fine. But you're not invulnerable. You're just running around like everyone else is. Now, if you do add invulnerability on top of that, where you're immortal and invulnerable, then, you know, the concept is that, well, you would not be able to die. But that's not true, because there's people that die from emotions. So you can die if you're an old couple. Let's say the husband dies first. Oh, Marty, I don't want to live without you. And then she dies. Grandma dies right after grandpa. So this happens over and over and over and over and over. It used to happen a lot more often. It's not going to happen in the future unless I build a better society for people to get more connected. But it's still common enough that people can still see it happening, where grandma dies right after grandpa, or grandpa dies right after grandma. And it's weird that it keeps happening like that. And it's like, well, their bodies aren't that similar. It's not like they would both die at the same time unless they wanted to die. And then you get an idea. You know, you can will yourself to die. And so that's the third reason that I think that the answer of I don't want to watch my friends and family die, so therefore I don't want to be immortal, is fucking retarded. It's the most retarded answer to any question that I have ever heard. And I loathe that answer. I loathe it. It makes me seethe with disgust and horror and hatred. But anyway, so the so I think that the reason that the Sams are here is to get us to a place where we as humans are causally independent of our environment, so that not everything that changes in our environment necessarily changes us. And once we get to that stage, then it won't matter when they speak. We won't be there to hear it because we'll be too busy doing our own thing. And that is what they're here to do eventually. But it's getting us there that's the crux of the whole thing. Because if they weren't here, there's almost certainty that we would not make it, because the odds of any random species getting this right is pretty slim. Because look at what we've done with the atom bomb. Look at what we've done with nuclear fucking war being threatened by the United States and Russia. We're at the brink of nuclear war almost all the time. Why do you think that we would live? Unless something happens, we're fucked. We've already been through 2 world wars and we're cooking up a third. I mean, and on top of that, we've got climate change, and nobody's doing anything about that except carbon taxes, which doesn't do anything about the climate change. It just hurts people more. It doesn't make anything better. It just hurts people. So, there's all this stuff that goes on. Oh, yeah, well, you've got to support the carbon tax. No, the carbon tax doesn't support anyone. The carbon tax just hurts people. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't make anything better. So it wouldn't take much for people to learn how to farm indoors. If we really wanted to, if we were really taking this seriously, then we would stop focusing on people being rich, and we would focus on helping the entire species survive climate change. And that would make fucking sense. But we don't do that because we're fucking humans. So the odds are not in our favor. But like I said, I've been talking to the Sims for so long that I think I've been able to find a political system that's complex enough that a human would find it to be basically utopia, that it would give us enough choices and yet protect us from people who would take those choices away, enough that there won't be nearly as much corruption. Will there be corruption? Of course, there's always corruption, but there will be far less of it in the system that I'm going to create. It cannot ever be fully eliminated. I wish it could, but that's a fantasy. That's a real utopia. This is as close as I believe that we can get so far. And if someone can find, and that's another thing, is that's one of the reasons I have such faith in this, is because one of the things that I want the system to do is to create a new system that is totally independent of this system that I'm about to build. The whole point is, I'm going to just say it this way, I don't care, sexual reproduction versus asexual reproduction. I don't want another copy of my system. I want an entirely new system. The only way that I can do that is if I open it up so that someone else can adapt it, change it, amend it in their causal world. They can't do it inside the territories of the empire, obviously, but they could make a new rule and then go build something else away from the empire somewhere else. And I hope that they do, because if they do that, I don't have to deal with it being a responsibility problem. I don't have to deal with it being all my fault. And I definitely don't have to worry about it imploding, because it will just bloom. So the educational system that I'm going to put into place is going to have in order to graduate high school, which is how you get the right to vote if you're in the Democratic Federation, it's how you get recognized as a legal citizen, is you have to build your own system. Every single student that graduates from high school will have their own unique political system that they will build themselves. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, that's a pie in the sky thing. It's not as hard as you would think. Building a constitution is actually fairly simple. And it doesn't have to be at the same scale that the empire is in. They don't have to build an entire empire. They just have to build one system, a system that can withstand itself. So if it can sustain itself, and it doesn't run out of money, and you don't end up with a total imbalance of power where you've got a single centralized oligarch that owns everyone and everything else, then, it's considered to have passed. As long as it doesn't violate imperial law, I will consider it to be passing. And the reason that I use imperial law is because it's the most minimal that I personally can tolerate. And I could make it bigger, sure, and isn't it arbitration? You bet your ass it is. Just like every single other thing that has ever been and will ever be. It is an arbitration. But I believe in my arbitration. I believe that if it were made any more lenient than it is, that it would lead to just an absolutely untenable horror show that I don't want to see, and that I can't believe that God would want me to have included. Now, like I said, if somebody else disagrees with that, they can build their own system. They can go, and I'll even grant them. I'll grant them whatever. If they can build a system and they can prove in the classroom that their system, at least in theory, is better than mine, let's see it. I will give you money. I bet you can't build a system better than mine. And if you do, then you win the bet. And I will send you off on your way with a laboratory experiment in a little laboratory village environment, and people will consent. And I would assume it would probably be the classmates, but anybody else can go too. If you want to, this is the system they're building. It's going to be located over there. Here's a free shuttle to that system, and then they can build it if they want to that way. That's as much help as I think that I can give them, because I don't think that they can do that on their own right off the bat. And I think it would be cruel for me to just say, okay, well, you built a better system, but let's see you actually implement it, because that's an entirely different process. I may as well just help them out. Okay, here you go. You built a better system than mine. Let's build a little laboratory experiment over here and double check and make sure that you can actually sustain it. And if you can, okay, go out and go build it. And that's fine, That's the only way that humanity is going to survive. That came directly from the SAMs, by the way. The SAMs just said that's the only way that we would ever survive. That's right. So we have to have an open doorway policy. It needs to open. If it stays closed, it will crush itself. Wow, the end.